The November blizzard hit Silver Creek, Colorado like the hammer of God himself, sending snow sideways through the mountain passes and turning the prosperous mining town into a whitewashed ghost of itself. In the warmth of O'Malley's forge, Thomas McKenna worked the bellows with steady rhythm, watching the coals glow cherry red as he prepared to shape another horseshoe for the cavalry remount station. At 26, Tom had been working iron for 10 years since arriving in America with nothing but the clothes on his back and a letter of introduction from a priest in County Cork. Patrick O'Malley had taken him on as an apprentice, and Tom had proven himself one of the finest smiths in the Colorado Territory. His strong arms and careful, I could shape metal like most men shape clay, and his reputation for honest work had made O'Malley's forge the most respected in all the mining camps from Denver to Leadville. Tom, lad, called Patrick from the front of the shop, where he was banking the fire for night. This storm's a proper beast. No one be needin' iron work in weather like this. Aye, Mr. O'Malley, Tom replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a leather apron. I'll just finish this shoe and... His words were cut off by desperate pounding on the shop door. Through the frost-covered windows, Tom could make out a dark figure hunched against the driving snow. Saints preserve us, Patrick muttered, hurrying to unlock the heavy wooden door. Who'd be out in weather like this? The door swung open to reveal a woman on the verge of collapse, her dark cloak soaked through and ice crystals clinging to her auburn hair. She stumbled into the warmth of the forge, shivering so violently she could barely speak. Please, she gasped, her voice refined despite her obvious distress. I need shelter, just until the storm passes. Tom was beside her in an instant, catching her elbow as she swayed on her feet. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with striking green eyes and features that spoke of good breeding. Her clothes, though soaked and mud-stained, were well made, and her boots were fine leather that had seen hard travel. Patrick, get some blankets in the back room, Tom ordered, guiding the woman to a chair near the forge. Miss, you're half frozen. How long have you been walking in this storm? Hours, she whispered, accepting the cup of hot coffee Tom pressed into her trembling hands. I lost my way. Thought I could reach town before the worst of it hit. Lost your way from where? Patrick asked gently, wrapping a thick wool blanket around her shoulders. The woman hesitated, and Tom caught something guarded in her expression. Denver. I was traveling to Leadville to take a position as a governess. Tom frowned. The story didn't quite fit. No sensible person would attempt the mountain passes alone in November, especially not a genteel woman seeking employment. But he could see the fear in her eyes, the way she glanced toward the door as if expecting pursuit. What's your name, miss? Patrick asked. Another hesitation. Mary Catherine O'Brien. The pause before the surname was slight, but Tom noticed it. He also noticed that despite her claims of being a governess, her hands were soft and white, without the calluses that came from hard domestic work. Well, Miss O'Brien, Patrick said kindly, you're welcome to shelter here until the storm passes. Tom, help me set up a proper space for the lady by the fire. As they arranged blankets and made her comfortable, Tom found himself studying their unexpected guest. Mary Catherine O'Brien was beautiful, certainly, but there was something else about her, an air of refinement, the way she held herself, the precise diction of her speech. She spoke like a woman of education and breeding, not someone seeking work as a governess. You're very kind, Mary Catherine said, her voice stronger now that warmth was returning to her body. I don't know how to repay such kindness. No need for repayment, miss, Tom replied. Out here, we help folks in trouble. It's what decent people do. Something in his tone, the genuine warmth, the lack of any expectation, made Mary Catherine look at him more closely. Tom McKenna was handsome in a rough, honest way that was completely different from the pampered men of her acquaintance. His dark hair was tousled from work, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms marked with small scars from years at the forge. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, kind blue eyes that looked at her with concern rather than calculation. Are you certain you were heading to Leadville? Tom asked gently. Because the road you would have taken from Denver doesn't pass this way. Mary Catherine's cheeks flushed, and Tom saw panic flicker across her features. Perhaps I took a wrong turn. I'm not familiar with these mountains. It was clearly a lie, but Tom didn't press. Whatever this woman was running from, it had her frightened enough to brave a Colorado blizzard alone. That took either desperation or courage, and he was inclined to think it was both. The storm should blow itself out by morning, Patrick said, settling into his chair by the fire. But Miss O'Brien, if you don't mind me saying, traveling alone to the mountains in winter isn't safe for anyone, let alone a young lady. I had little choice, Mary Catherine replied quietly. Trouble with your previous employer? Tom asked, remembering her claim about seeking a governess position. Yes, she said quickly, seizing on the explanation. He was inappropriate. I had to leave immediately. Tom's jaw tightened. He'd known men who took advantage of women in their employ, using their position to force unwanted attentions. It would explain her fear, her hasty departure, her reluctance to share details. Well, you're safe now, he said firmly. And if you're looking for honest work, Silver Creek's a good town. Folks here judge a person by their character, not their circumstances. Mary Catherine looked at him with something that might have been gratitude mixed with guilt. You're very trusting, mister. McKenna, Tom McKenna, and this is Patrick O'Malley, finest smith in Colorado Territory. Irish? She asked, noting his accent. County Cork, 10 years past. Came to America with nothing but hope and a strong back, and built himself into one of the most respected craftsmen in the territory. Patrick added proudly. Tom's got a gift with metal that's God-given and the work ethic to match. Mary Catherine studied Tom's face, seeing the pride in honest work, the satisfaction of a man who'd built his reputation through skill and integrity. It was so different from the world she'd known, where reputation came from bloodlines and bank accounts rather than personal achievement. What kind of work might be available for someone like me? She asked. Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house. She's always needing help with cooking and cleaning, Tom said. And Miss Sarah at the dress shop mentioned needing someone who can sew. You have experience with needlework. Mary Catherine nodded, grateful that her expensive education had included such accomplishments. Yes, I'm quite skilled with a needle. Then you'll do fine here, Tom said. Silver Creek's not fancy, but it's honest. People work hard. Treat each other fair, and don't much care where you came from as long as you pull your weight. As the storm raged outside and the fire crackled in the forge, Mary Catherine, Margaret Catherine Whitmore, heiress to millions, found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something deeply comforting about the warmth of the smithy, the honest faces of the two Irishmen who'd taken her in without question, and especially the kind blue eyes of Tom McKenna. She'd fled San Francisco to escape a life of gilded captivity, but perhaps she'd found something even more valuable here in this simple mountain town, the chance to discover who she really was when stripped of title and fortune. If only she could keep her secrets long enough to find out. 3 months in Silver Creek had taught Margaret Catherine Whitmore, who the townspeople knew only as Mary Catherine O'Brien, what it truly meant to work for her living. Her hands, once soft as silk and white as cream, now bore the small calluses and needle pricks that came from long days spent sewing at Miss Sarah's dress shop. But far from feeling sorry for herself, she discovered a deep satisfaction in creating beautiful things with her own skills. Your stitching is the finest I've ever seen, Miss Sarah Wheeler told her one snowy February morning as she examined Mary Catherine's latest work, a wedding dress for the banker's daughter with intricate beadwork that would have impressed the finest couturiers in Paris. Where did you learn such technique? My mother taught me, Mary Catherine replied carefully. It wasn't entirely a lie. The Countess of Pemberton, her mother's dearest friend, had indeed taught her elaborate needlework during summers at the family estate. She said a lady should always have accomplished hands. Miss Sarah, a spinster of 45 who'd come west to teach school and stay to run the dress shop, nodded approvingly. Your mother was a wise woman. And speaking of accomplished hands, I believe you've caught the attention of our Tom McKenna. Mary Catherine felt her cheeks warm as she bent over her sewing. Tom had indeed been paying her attention, walking her home from the shop each evening, bringing her small gifts he crafted in the forge, joining her for dinner at Henderson's boarding house, where she rented a modest room. She found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. "Mr. McKenna is very kind," she said carefully. "Kind and smitten as a schoolboy," Miss Sarah observed with amusement. "Haven't seen Tom this taken with anyone since he arrived in Silver Creek. Course, he's always been particular. Never paid court to any of the local girls, though Lord knows half of them have set their caps for him." Mary Catherine tried to ignore the flutter of jealousy at the thought of other women pursuing Tom. She had no right to such feelings, not when she was living a lie that grew more complicated with each passing day. Has he been in Silver Creek long?" she asked, trying to sound casual. 10 years now, since he was barely more than a boy. Came west with nothing but determination and that Irish charm of his. Patrick O'Malley took him under his wing, and Tom's made himself into one of the most respected men in town. Miss Sarah's voice warmed with genuine affection. "He's good people, Mary Catherine. The kind of man who'd make a fine husband and father." The word sent a pang through Mary Catherine's heart. Tom would indeed make a wonderful husband. Honest, hard-working, gentle with children and animals alike. She'd seen him help old Mrs. Peterson repair her fence without being asked. Watched him craft a toy horse for little Jimmy Crawford just to see the boy smile. He was everything the men of her own social circle were not. Genuine, unpretentious, and more interested in a person's character than their connections. That evening, as Tom walked her home from the dress shop through the crisp mountain air, Mary Catherine found herself studying his profile in the gaslight from the street lamps. He'd grown even more handsome over winter months. His face bronzed from the forge fires, his shoulders broad from years of swinging heavy hammers. "Penny for your thoughts," Tom said, catching her staring. "I was just thinking how different life is here from what I knew before," she replied truthfully. "Different how?" Mary Catherine considered her words carefully. "More honest, I suppose. People here are valued for what they do, not what they have or who their families are." That's the beauty of the frontier," Tom agreed. "A man or woman can make themselves into whoever they choose to be, as long as they're willing to work for it." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Mary Catherine. Here she was pretending to be someone she wasn't, while Tom talked about the freedom to be authentic. Yet in many ways, Mary Catherine O'Brien was more her true self than Margaret Whitmore had ever been allowed to be. "Tom," she said suddenly, "what do you want from life? What are your dreams?" Tom was quiet for a moment, and Mary Catherine worried she'd overstepped some boundary. But when he spoke, his voice was warm with shared confidence. "I want to open my own forge someday. Not just shoeing horses and mending tools, but creating beautiful things, gates and railings and decorative ironwork. Patrick's been teaching me the finer points of the craft, and I've been saving every penny I can." He paused, then added quietly, "And I want a family. A wife who's my partner in all things, children to teach the trade to, a home filled with love and laughter." Mary Catherine's heart clenched with longing. "That sounds wonderful. What about you, Mary Catherine? What do you dream of?" The question caught her off guard. What did she dream of? For 23 years, her life had been planned for her. The school she'd attend, the society she'd enter, the man she'd marry. This was the first time anyone had asked what she wanted for herself. "I dream of being valued for who I am, not what I represent," she said slowly. "Of building something meaningful with my own hands. Of finding someone who loves me for my character rather than my circumstances." Tom stopped walking and turned to face her, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight. "Mary Catherine, I hope you know that's exactly how I see you. Your kindness, your intelligence, the way you worked so hard to build a life here. Those are the things that matter to me." For a moment, Mary Catherine thought he might kiss her right there on Main Street, and she found herself hoping he would. But Tom was too much of a gentleman, too respectful of her reputation. "I'd like to court you properly," he said instead, "if you're amenable to the idea." "I would like that very much," Mary Catherine whispered. As they continued toward the boarding house, Mary Catherine felt a complex mix of joy and guilt. She was falling in love with Tom McKenna, deeply, completely, in a way she'd never imagined possible. But she was also living a lie that grew more painful with each honest word he spoke to her. Over the following weeks, Tom's courtship was everything Mary Catherine had dreamed of but never experienced. He brought her wildflowers he'd picked in the mountains, crafted delicate metal roses in his forge, read poetry to her in the boarding house parlor under the watchful eye of Mrs. Henderson. He treated her like something precious but not fragile, respecting her intelligence while also protecting her reputation. "You're different from any woman I've ever known," Tom told her one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "Different how?" Mary Catherine asked, though part of her feared the answer. "You've got breeding and education, but you're not proud about it. You work hard without complaint. But you've got a way of speaking and carrying yourself that says you come from better circumstances than most folks here." Tom's voice was gentle but observant. "I sometimes wonder if there's more to your story than you've told me." Mary Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "Everyone has secrets, Tom." "Aye, that's true enough. But Mary Catherine, whatever happened before, whatever you're running from, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is the woman you are now, the life we could build together." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her heart. Here was a man offering her exactly what she'd always wanted. Love based on who she truly was rather than what she represented. But he was offering it to Mary Catherine O'Brien, seamstress and former governess, not Margaret Whitmore, mining heiress and runaway bride. "Tom," she said carefully, "what if you discovered I wasn't exactly who you think I am? Are you a good person with a kind heart who works honest for her living?" Tom asked. "I try to be." "Then that's all I need to know." Tom reached for her hand, his callous fingers gentle against her palm. "Mary Catherine, I love you. Not your past, not your secrets, not whatever circumstances brought you here. I love the woman who sits beside me now." As Tom's words washed over her, Mary Catherine realized that for the first time in her life, someone loved her completely for herself. The tragedy was that the self he loved was built on a foundation of lies that threatened to destroy them both. But in that moment, with Tom's strong hand holding hers and the Colorado sunset painting the sky in impossible colors, Mary Catherine allowed herself to believe that love might be strong enough to survive the truth. She had no idea how soon that belief would be tested. By late spring, Tom McKenna had saved enough money to buy the ring he'd been dreaming of for months. It wasn't much by some standards, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the light like a mountain stream, but it represented every spare penny he'd earned, every extra hour he'd worked at the forge. "It's beautiful, lad," Patrick O'Malley said, examining the ring with the eye of a craftsman. "The lass will be pleased." "You think so?" Tom asked, suddenly nervous. "It's not fancy like what she might be accustomed to." "Tom McKenna, you've been courting that girl for 4 months, and she looks at you like you hung the moon itself. The ring could be made of tin and brass for all she'd care." Patrick's weathered face crinkled with amusement. "Besides, I've seen how Mary Catherine lives, modest as a church mouse, working honest for her bread. She's not the type to judge a man's worth by the size of his diamonds." Tom nodded, though privately he sometimes wondered about Mary Catherine's background. In the months since she'd arrived in Silver Creek, he'd noticed things. The way she sometimes forgot to speak with a slight Irish accent she'd originally affected, her knowledge of subjects no governess would have studied, the occasional slip that revealed familiarity with luxury she claimed never to have known. But whatever secrets Mary Catherine held, Tom had meant what he told her. He loved the woman she was now, the woman who worked beside Miss Sarah crafting beautiful dresses, who helped Mrs. Henderson with her charity work, who sat with him on the porch sharing dreams and hopes for the future. "I'll ask her tonight," Tom decided, slipping the ring into his vest pocket, after the church social. The monthly church social was Silver Creek's biggest community event, with families gathering to share food, music, and gossip. Tom had been looking forward to it for weeks, planning to ask Mary Catherine to marry him in the little garden behind the church where they'd shared their first kiss just a month before. That evening, as couples danced to fiddle music in the church hall, Tom watched Mary Catherine with growing love and pride. She'd worn her finest dress, one she'd sewn herself in deep blue silk that brought out her eyes, and every man in the room had noticed how beautiful she looked. But she only had eyes for Tom, smiling at him across the room with the special warmth she reserved for him alone. "Might I have this dance, Miss O'Brien?" Tom asked formally, offering his arm as the musician struck up a waltz. "It would be my pleasure, Mr. McKenna," Mary Catherine replied with equal formality, though her eyes danced with mischief. As they moved together across the floor, Tom marveled at how perfectly Mary Catherine fit in his arms, how naturally she followed his lead despite her obvious superior education in dancing. Everything about her suggested refinement and breeding, yet she'd adapted to life in Silver Creek with grace and determination. "You're looking particularly beautiful tonight," Tom murmured as they turned slowly to the music. "And you're looking quite handsome yourself," Mary Catherine replied, smoothing his tie with gentle fingers. "I'm the envy of every woman here. Are you happy, Mary Catherine? Truly happy with the life you've built here?" The question was loaded with meaning, and Mary Catherine understood what he was really asking. Was she content with their simple existence? Could she be satisfied with the modest life he could offer her? "Happier than I've ever been," she said honestly. "Tom, this life we've built together, this community we're part of, it's everything I never knew I wanted." After the dance, Tom suggested a walk in the garden, and Mary Catherine agreed readily. The spring air was soft and warm, filled with the scent of the apple blossoms that grew behind the church. They'd walked here many times over the past months, sharing quiet conversations under the stars. "Mary Catherine," Tom began, his heart hammering so loudly he was certain she could hear it. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life." "Mine, too," she whispered, sensing something momentous in his tone. Tom took her hands in his, noting how they trembled slightly. "I know I'm not wealthy, and I can't offer you luxury or society, but I can offer you my whole heart, my complete devotion, and a partnership built on love and respect." Mary Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes as Tom dropped to one knee in the soft grass, pulling the small ring from his pocket. "Mary Catherine O'Brien, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Mary Catherine couldn't speak past the emotion choking her throat. Here was everything she'd ever dreamed of. A man who loved her truly, who valued her for herself, who offered partnership rather than possession. The fact that he was poor rather than rich, a craftsman rather than a gentleman, made his proposal more precious, not less. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Tom McKenna, I will marry you." Tom slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook with emotion, then rose to kiss her with all the love and passion he'd been holding back during their careful courtship. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like children. "It's beautiful," Mary Catherine said, admiring the ring in the moonlight. "Tom, it's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen." Her words were absolutely true, not because of the diamond size or the gold's purity, but because it represented something she'd never had before, love freely given and received. Over the following weeks, Silver Creek buzzed with preparations for the wedding. Mrs. Henderson insisted on hosting the reception at the boarding house. Miss Sarah volunteered to make Mary Catherine's wedding dress, and Patrick O'Malley offered to give the bride away since she had no family present. "It's not much of a wedding compared to what you might have had back east," Tom said one evening as they reviewed their simple plans. "It's perfect," Mary Catherine assured him. "Tom, I don't need elaborate ceremonies or expensive celebrations. I just need you." As the wedding day approached, Mary Catherine found herself battling increasing guilt about her deception. She'd written several letters to Tom, trying to explain who she really was. But each attempt seemed inadequate. How could she make him understand that Margaret Whitmore was a lie and Mary Catherine O'Brien was her true self? She'd also been plagued by practical concerns. Eventually, her father would track her down. Cornelius Whitmore had resources that made escape nearly impossible in the long term. When that happened, how could she protect Tom from the consequences of her deception? But as she stood in Miss Sarah's shop for the final fitting of her wedding dress, simple white cotton with delicate lace trim she'd made herself, Mary Catherine pushed her fears aside. Tomorrow she would marry the man she loved, and somehow they would face whatever came after. "You look radiant," Miss Sarah said, adjusting the veil that had belonged to her own mother. "Tom McKenna is the luckiest man in Colorado Territory." "I'm the lucky one," Mary Catherine replied softly. "I never knew love could feel like this. So safe and exciting at the same time. That's how it should be, dear. A good marriage is built on friendship as much as passion, respect as much as desire. Miss Sarah's voice grew wistful. I had such a love once, before the war took him. I'm glad to see you found the same. That night, Mary Catherine lay awake in her narrow bed at the boarding house, listening to mountain wind and thinking about the vows she would speak tomorrow, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, words that would bind her to Tom McKenna for life. The irony of for richer or poorer wasn't lost on her. Tom believed he was marrying a poor seamstress, when in fact he was about to wed one of the wealthiest women in America. But Mary Catherine had never felt richer than she did now, surrounded by people who valued her for her character rather than her bank account. Tomorrow, Mary Catherine O'Brien would become Mary Catherine McKenna, and perhaps Margaret Whitmore could finally be laid to rest forever. She fell asleep with Tom's ring on her finger and hope in her heart, never imagining that her past was already racing towards Silver Creek with the speed and inevitability of an avalanche. The morning of May 15th, 1888, dawned clear and bright over Silver Creek, with mountain air so crisp it seemed to sparkle in the early sunlight. Mary Catherine stood at the window of her room at Henderson's boarding house, watching the town come alive as she prepared for her wedding day. "Nervous, dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked, bustling in with a breakfast tray and a maternal smile. "A little," Mary Catherine admitted, though truthfully her stomach was churning with more than wedding nerves. She'd barely slept, plagued by dreams of discovery and a persistent feeling that her carefully constructed new life was about to crumble. "That's natural as breathing," Mrs. Henderson assured her. "I was sick as a dog the morning I married my Henry, God rest his soul. But once I saw him standing at that altar, everything else just melted away." 2 hours later, Mary Catherine stood before the mirror in Miss Sarah's shop, wearing the wedding dress she'd sewn with her own hands. The white cotton was simple but elegant, with tiny pearl buttons and delicate lace at the throat and sleeves. Miss Sarah had arranged orange blossoms in her auburn hair, and the borrowed veil cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. "You're absolutely beautiful," Miss Sarah said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Tom won't know what hit him when he sees you coming down that aisle." Through the shop window, Mary Catherine could see townspeople making their way toward a small wooden church at the end of Main Street. It seemed like all of Silver Creek had turned out for the wedding. Miners and shopkeepers, ranchers and their wives, children clutching handfuls of wildflowers to throw at the bride and groom. "Are you ready, lass?" Patrick O'Malley appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his one good suit, his usually gruff face soft with paternal pride. Since Mary Catherine had no family present, he'd insisted on walking her down the aisle. "I'm ready," Mary Catherine said, though her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. The short walk to the church seemed to take forever and no time at all. Mary Catherine was vaguely aware of smiling faces and well wishes from the townspeople, but her attention was focused on the church ahead, where Tom waited for her at the altar. Inside the church, every pew was packed. The altar was decorated with mountain laurel and wild roses, and Reverend William stood beaming in his black robes. But Mary Catherine only had eyes for Tom, who turned as the wedding march began and looked at her with such love and wonder that she nearly stopped breathing. He was devastatingly handsome in his new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes bright with joy and emotion. As Patrick escorted her down the aisle, Tom's face lit up with a smile that made Mary Catherine feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Williams began when Mary Catherine reached the altar and took Tom's offered hand, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Mary Catherine tried to focus on the familiar words, but her heart was beating so loudly she could barely hear over sound. Tom's hand in hers was warm and steady, anchoring her in a moment even as her mind raced with guilt and fear. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly," the Reverend continued, "but reverently, advisedly, and in the fear of God. If anyone knows of any lawful impediment why these two should not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional pause seemed to stretch endlessly. Mary Catherine held her breath, half expecting some dramatic intervention, but the church remained peacefully quiet. She was just beginning to relax when the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church burst open with a crash that echoed off the walls. Every head turned as three men strode down the aisle with the authority of those accustomed to having their way. The leader was a distinguished gentleman in his 50s, wearing an expensive Eastern suit and carrying himself with the bearing of wealth and power. Behind him walked two younger men, one in the uniform of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, the other in clothes that marked him as a gentleman of means and ambition. Mary Catherine felt the blood drain from her face as she recognized the third man. Jonathan Blackwood, the man she fled San Francisco to avoid marrying, looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a cold, calculating way, with pale eyes that seemed to appraise everything they saw. "I believe I can answer that question about lawful impediments," the older man announced in a voice that carried easily through the stunned silence. "My daughter is already legally bound to marry another man." "Papa," Mary Catherine whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. The collective gasp from the congregation was audible as the pieces fell into place. The mysterious bride who'd appeared from nowhere suddenly had a father, and not just any father, but one whose presence commanded instant attention and respect. Margaret Catherine Whitmore. Cornelius Whitmore continued, his voice carrying the authority of a man worth millions. "You will come with us immediately. This charade has gone on quite long enough." Tom stood frozen beside her, his face pale with shock and growing understanding. "Whitmore," he repeated, the name hitting him like a physical blow. "As in Whitmore Mining? You're—" He looked at Mary Catherine with dawning horror. "You're an heiress." "Tom, please let me explain," Mary Catherine began desperately. "Explain what?" Tom's voice was raw with pain and betrayal. "That you've been lying to me for months? That you're not Mary Catherine O'Brien at all, but some millionaire's daughter slumming among the common folk." Jonathan Blackwood stepped forward with a cold smile. "Miss Whitmore, I must say this little adventure of yours has caused considerable inconvenience. Our wedding was to have taken place 4 months ago." "I never agreed to that wedding," Mary Catherine said, finding her voice despite her terror. "That was Papa's arrangement, not mine. An arrangement that is both legal and financially binding," Cornelius Whitmore declared. "Margaret, you are my daughter and my heir, but you are also bound by contract signed on your behalf. Mr. Blackwood has invested considerable sums based on our agreement." The Pinkerton agent, a lean man with calculating eyes, spoke for the first time. "Miss Whitmore, you've led us quite a chase, but it's time to come home and face your responsibilities." Tom turned to Mary Catherine, his blue eyes blazing with hurt and anger. "Is it true? Are you already engaged to him?" "Not by choice," Mary Catherine said desperately. "Tom, everything I told you about my feelings was true. I love you, not him. I don't care about his money or position." "But you do have money and position," Tom interrupted bitterly. "You're worth millions, aren't you? While I've been saving pennies to buy you a ring, you could probably buy this entire town. The money doesn't matter." "Doesn't matter?" Tom's laugh was harsh. "You've been living a lie for 4 months, letting me make a fool of myself, letting the whole town believe you were something you're not." "I am what you think I am," Mary Catherine pleaded. "Margaret Whitmore is the lie, the role I was forced to play. Mary Catherine is who I really am inside." Cornelius Whitmore's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Enough of this nonsense. Margaret, you will come with us now, or I'll have you declared mentally incompetent and committed to an institution until you come to your senses." The threat hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mary Catherine knew her father well enough to know he would carry it out if necessary. In 1888, a woman could be institutionalized on word of her male relatives, especially if millions of dollars hung in the balance. "You can't do this," Tom said, stepping protectively in front of Mary Catherine. "She's a grown woman, free to make her own choices." "She's my daughter and my property until she marries," Cornelius replied coldly. "And when she marries, she becomes her husband's property. That's the law, young man, whether you like it or not." Jonathan Blackwood moved closer, his pale eyes fixed on Mary Catherine with possessive satisfaction. "My dear, you've had your little rebellion, but it's time to return to reality. We have a wedding to plan and business arrangements to finalize." "I'll never marry you," Mary Catherine said, lifting her chin with defiant pride. "I'd rather die first." That can be arranged, Blackwood replied with a cold smile that made Mary Catherine's blood freeze. Tom stepped forward again, his fists clenched. Are you threatening her? I'm simply pointing out that accidents happen to people who interfere with business arrangements worth millions of dollars. Blackwood's tone was conversational, but the threat was unmistakable. The congregation watched in horrified silence as the drama played out before them. These people had come to celebrate a wedding between two of their own, only to discover that the bride was one of the wealthiest women in America and was being claimed by forces beyond their comprehension. Tom, Mary Catherine said quietly, taking his hand, marry me, right now, before they can stop us. Tom looked down at her, his face torn between love and betrayal. Mary Catherine, Margaret, whoever you are, I don't even know you anymore. You know me better than anyone ever has, she whispered. You know my heart, my dreams, the woman I am when I'm free to choose. Please, Tom, don't let them take me back to that prison of wealth and obligation. For a moment, Tom wavered, love warring with wounded pride. But then he shook his head, stepping back from her. I can't, he said, his voice breaking. I can't marry someone who's been lying to me from the day we met. How do I know what's real and what's performance? Mary Catherine felt her heart shatter as Tom pulled his hand from hers. In that moment, she realized that honesty had come too late. The foundation of lies she'd built their relationship on had destroyed any chance of happiness. Very well, she said, draw herself up with the regal bearing that was her birthright. Papa, Mr. Blackwood, I'll come with you. But understand this. I'll never willingly marry Jonathan Blackwood, and I'll make both your lives miserable until the day I die. As the Pinkertons escorted her from the church, Mary Catherine looked back once at Tom, memorizing his face for the lonely years ahead. He stood at the altar in his wedding suit, looking lost and broken, surrounded by friends who suddenly didn't know what to make of their mysterious seamstress turned heiress. I love you, Tom McKenna, she called out as they reached the door. That was the one true thing in all of this. I love you. Tom's eyes met hers across the church, and for a moment she saw the love still burning there beneath the hurt and anger. But he didn't speak, didn't try to stop her, and Mary Catherine was led away to face a future as gilded and empty as the cage she'd briefly escaped. Outside, 3 carriages waited to carry her back to her old life, but Mary Catherine Whitmore, who would always be Mary Catherine McKenna in her heart, climbed into the first one with her head held high, carried with a memory of 6 perfect months when she'd been loved for exactly who she was. It would have to be enough to last a lifetime.